So what I did was years ago, I didn't understand any of this stuff. This was one of the things that I struggled with for almost a decade. Why are people buying bullshit? I could not understand it. I mean, we are all susceptible to bullshit. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm one who is above that. Like I have bit for bad data all the time. I've bit on conspiracy theories before. So every human being is susceptible to bad information, but some people don't even want to try to vet it. And I couldn't understand why. So there are at least two reasons in the literature that suggest why, and one of them is anxiety. Every single person has some anxiety. I think it's because we're animals inherently, and there's like a fight or flight, basic instinctual anxiety. Most of us can kind of work through the anxiety, but it gets triggered in certain cases, and it gets too big for each one of us. And during a COVID infection or a COVID catastrophic global crisis where we really don't know how it spread and we really don't know where it came from and we really don't like all of that chaotic stuff will trigger fear and anxiety. We'll see this in natural disasters. We'll see this in other scenarios. And what happens is apparently our minds are wired to craft simple stories to try to explain it. So we immediately adapt stories and we say, well, maybe it's this, or maybe it's that, or maybe this is the reason. And our minds just make up stories. And they're simple, they're typically incomplete, they typically aren't, they don't have any sense of the huge big picture, and they're usually misinformed, the stories we tell ourselves. But at the same time, we also get super anxious, apparently. And so in come what we call the strong man or the strong people, the bluster people, I call them. And they will often come in and they'll appear as though they understand what's going on. And they'll say, well, I actually know truth. And they look courageous, they look intelligent, and people like to hear the stories. And so there's a lot of that happening in the world. And in fact, grifters often look for people who are anxious, and then they come in with a false bravado and they come with false stories. And people will say, oh, this guy or this woman or this person knows so much, and they glom onto them. And that's one of the main reasons. The second reason is social identity. This has been an interesting rabbit hole for me in study space. I've actually gone and taken a look at a lot of research on the social identity piece. I've been trying to understand it. I will not say that I fully understand it, but I've been doing a lot of conversations with people who've studied this piece for their entire careers. And if I characterize it pretty simply, apparently, there are social psychological and even anthropological theories about why we need to feel like we belong to an in group and why we need external validation of self. I like when you like me. I want to be part of your group. And not only do I want to be part of your group, I want to be super respected by you. And every time you give me more status and more labels, I feel better. And there's this notion about getting this external validation that allows us to feel like we'll stay with the group. It builds loyalty. And I saw this in evidence in the cryptocurrency space with crypto influencers. And I wrote a paper about that, leveraging some of the literature. And also, I see this in the political arena where we have sort of political belief structures. And again, I here I show, some of the Trump political followers, but I've seen this in other groups, left wing, right wings. Like it's not unique to this particular category. So I'm not making a political statement with this photograph here. It's just illustrative. So these two things are really, really powerful. I will say too that the literature suggests, I've seen literature that suggests that when we are excommunicated from a group that we care about, it triggers the same neurological pathways as physical pain. And so from what I've read, at least one study suggests that we incur what is fundamentally physical pain when we're kicked out of an in-group. Also, the anthropologists suggest that we stay with groups in part due to our deep, deep history, where if we were excommunicated, we would likely die because we couldn't live alone. And you need like a community in order to survive.